So you can only open up the consoles of these 4 routers. And of course, you can open up with the console PC here. So whichever the PC you have a specific console cable, you can just go ahead and open up the consoles that way. And again, the EIGRP AS number as it is 212 here. But again, in the question, it may be 12. Sometimes it will be different AS number as well. Okay, so let's see the configuration wise. I'm going to open up the consoles of these devices. So this is my router 1, and the router names can be different as what you may see here. And the password will be generally Cisco. So you can go and verify the show running configurations. And if I go and check the router 1, so on the router 1, if I see any misconfigurations, probably I need to do. So and again, the question says the issue with a routing configuration. So most likely the IPs will be correct. So you don't need to really worry about the IPs. But if you just want to just confirm that, you can confirm. But again, time management is also important. So you cannot simply go and spend more time on unnecessary things like here. As the question did not specifically mention the IP kind of thing. But still, you need to have an idea. So like on the router 1, these are the interfaces. And make sure that all these interfaces are advertised here with a proper AS number. And the question says it's 212 or 12. It depends. Like here, I'm taking it as 212. But it may be 12 or it may be just 21 or any number it can be, okay? So make sure that we do have advertisements. So we are advertising this interface. It's there. This network is there. Probably 36 and 60 is there. And so this interface is not required because this is connecting to service providers. So this is not required because this is 198. We don't need to worry about this interface. And can you see this interface 77.network? 77.network is missing. Of course, this also is advertised. It's okay, but normally that is not required because the question says the problem is on inside, not towards the service pod, because we'll be using some default routes normally. So 77 is missing here. So on the router 1, so 77 is missing. If you verify show IP interface brief, of course, this may not work in the exams. Do show IP interface brief commands. So 77 is missing in the routing configuration. So we'll just use this router EIGRP 212. Same number. Network 192.168.77.0 was missing. So on the router 1, we realized that one interface was not advertised. I think this was the interface 77 because router 3 is added, but this interface was not advertised. That's the reason the router 3 was not communicating. So that was the first problem. Fixed it. Of course, save the configurations by using copy run start whenever you make any changes. Apart from that, all the things seems to be okay, but we'll also confirm the same thing on the router 2 just to ensure that in the router 2 there is no misconfigurations. Of course, you can also verify with show IP EIGRP neighbors here to verify the neighbors. Now here you can see there are 2 interfaces it shows. S0 by 0, this is working, and S0 by 1, this is working, but this is not working. Means there is a problem on the router 3 also because the router 3 is not showing the neighbor. So most likely there's no problem on the router 2 and the router 4, but you just want to confirm, you can go ahead and do that. But I recommend you just first go to this router 3 and fix that one. So if I go to router 3 here, password is Cisco, and if I go and say show running config, so if I verify the routing configurations on the router 3, we have 60.network and 77.network. Of course, the routing is okay, but the problem is the AS number. AS number has to match in EIGRP. So if I'm using 212 AS number here also it should be 212. So the AS number has to match. In OSPF, no need to match the process ID, but here this number has to be same on both the sides. Okay, so which means here we need to remove the EIGRP 22, whatever the 22. We have to reconfigure this with EIGRP 212. 212 as per the question, or maybe 12. Like here you can see in this diagram it shows 12 here. In this diagram it shows 212. So it may vary. So check the question, check the diagram. And I'm going to advertise these two networks exactly the same. So we'll say network 192.168.60.network, network 192.168.77.network. Now we can see the router 3 establishes the neighbor relationship with the router 1. So which means if I go and check on the router 1, I should see 3 neighbors now. Okay. And of course, when you make any changes, make sure that you also save the configurations with a copy run start command. And once you do this, the configuration seems to be okay. Okay, so this is your third simulation. And if you want to do some verification, okay, so there are some few additional things you may also need to do if required. Just check this. I'm assuming these things configurations, if it is present, then you can skip this. So this configuration is actually on this router. So basically in this router 1, we'll be having a default route, which is going to say that all the unknown traffic will be sent to this one. So there will be a default route, and there will be a command called IP default network. So let me quickly configure this. So if you verify this configuration is not present, and if the question says you need to test, or you need to make sure that these PCs can be able to access the service provider router. So there are additional things we need to check. If I say show IP route, we should see a default route, or if you say show run, you should see a command called IP route normally. There's nothing here. So I'll assume this is not present. We'll configure this. And of course, I need to know the opposite interface IP, but most likely I don't think this is required. So if you see the opposite interface IP, this is the IP. So I think the 24 will be, and 26 will be an IP address here. So I'll copy paste here, but that's not allowed on the other side. So let me paste in the ping 192.168.60.26. That's an opposite IP address. So this will ensure that we have a default route for any unknown traffic. So which means from here, you can reach the other side. So I'm just showing you this option because I don't know the exact IP what is present here for testing. If there's any IP here for testing, I can just go and test. There's nothing like IP here, 192.168.18.5. Okay, that's an interface IP again. Okay, so basically there is nothing you need to test, but make sure that this configuration is there. And there is one more command we need to say, IP default network. You have to add this command. Now there is something called IP default network. We have to give this address, this network range, 198.0.18.network. That is actually the IP of this network. So there's a network 192.18.0. I think is that 192.0.18. 198.0.18.0. That's an IP address. Now basically this command is going to tell that whatever the default route we have, this default route will be advertised to each and every one, so that if this user want to go to any unknown network, they will come here. Let me show you this configuration directly here. When I configure IP default network 198. I have to see show IP interface brief. I have to see what is IP. Actually, this is the IP address. This is the actual IP which is connecting to service portal. So I have to say 198.0.18.0 network. Okay. So which means when you do this, automatically what happens is if you go to router 2, if you say show IP route, or you can say show IP route EIGRP if that is there. So basically you will see this 190, whatever this net 198.network will be advertised as D*. D* is like default route. So most likely this is not required, but you just check this option. Okay, so basically you have to check this option if it is required in the exams or not. So if the question says that you need to have reachability from this PC, you should be able to access this IP address, and that is only possible when you advertise this default route basically to all the remaining routers. So of course this doesn't work, I think, in the packet tracer. You don't see this D asterisk actually, but this is something may work in the simulation exams or in the real devices. Okay, so this actually doesn't work here, and I assume this is not required here. Okay, so I just misconfigured this. Let me quickly do this. I think that's the reason it is not showing up. It's actually 198. So if you go and check on the router 2, so just a minute, you can see here I actually misconfigured the default router. Actually, let me start over this configuration one more time. So this IP is not the one which I have configured earlier, so that's the reason it's not working. So basically, let me remove this. Now this is really hectic, especially in the exams. If you are doing this kind of errors, you can see there's a lot of problems. Of course, here I can copy paste. If the copy paste option is available there, that will become easy. But again, you generally waste your lot of time by doing this unnecessary troubleshooting. So make sure that you do these things. Okay, it's something really good. I did some mistakes here unknowingly, so probably that's where the problem is. So we need to say IP route 0000 and 0000. The IP address is 198.0.18.0. So let me just confirm. Sorry, not 18.0. Again, the same problem. 18. The IP address of the opposite side. So again, if the IP address is mostly in the exams, you may not have this access to this one. It's fine. If you say show IP route static, you have a default route. And I need to say IP default network 198.0.18.0. So I need to specifically say this, which means if I go into router, you should see some but basically here there's no testing kind of thing, not required, but you need to make sure that you properly configure these commands. Okay, because in the questions they don't mention any specific. Of course, there are some passive interfaces. You ignore these passive interfaces. Now again, passive interfaces, you need to know the passive interface options are like. So basically here, whenever you say passive interface here, let's say there's a passive interface S0 by 2, whatever the interface facing here. So passive interface says that don't send any updates, EIGRP updates on this interface. But in the exams, let's say if the passive interface is configured with this interface, this interface means the neighborship will not form. So again, while troubleshooting, ensure that on the router 1, let's say any router, I'm specifically showing you the configurations on the router 1. When you say show running config, so make sure that you don't have any passive interface commands, especially the passive interface command you should not have on these interfaces. Because passive interface says don't send any updates, but receive the updates. That's the meaning of that. So if the hellos are not sent, then basically the neighborship is not going to form. So that might be one kind of troubleshooting you need to keep in mind. So you need to look all the possibilities, but at the end, these are the possible issues you may face. Okay, so make sure that you do have these configurations correctly done. Maybe testing is not required, and here it doesn't work again. And routing configurations are properly done. And of course, interface configurations, you don't need to do anything because that are pre-configured. Most likely the IPs, everything will be properly configured. Okay, that's what here you can see. There is a passive interface. If there is a passive interface configured on this interface, that will also impact the neighborship will not form. So make sure that you remove that in case if you see. Okay, so these are other things you need to check.